So I wanted to pop in here real quick just to share my story in the hopes that I can save another woman some undue hardship and unnecessary pain and struggle. So I was diagnosed with endometriosis back in 2007. Now it took me 7 years to get that diagnosis, but when I finally got the diagnosis, the recommendation was to have a laparoscopic surgery to have a look in there just to see like what was going on and where the endometriosis is located. So I had that surgery. Well, first let me talk a little bit about endometriosis, and I will go more in depth about that in another video. But with endometriosis, it manifests in different ways with women who experience it. So for some women, it can mean extremely painful periods, painful cramps, which was my experience. For others, it can be heavy periods, or some women have issues with trying to conceive. Some women can conceive, but they have issues carrying a pregnancy full term. I don't know about that because I've never tried to conceive, but those are just some of the things that happen when you have endometriosis. And so for me, it was just extremely excruciatingly painful. And so I had the surgery, and I thought everything was good, but then after about a couple months, like, the pain came back full force. Looking back on things, I understand why the pain came back. It wasn't because the surgery was not successful. It more so had to do with the situation that I was in, which was a very toxic relationship. I was unhappy, and it was manifesting through pain. And so I went back to the doctor, and so they basically was like, well, you had surgery, so the only other options at this point would be for us to chemically induce menopause with medication, or you can just take continuous birth control pills, since you seem to tolerate birth control pills very well. So I had been on birth control pills at that point, trying to manage the endometriosis. And for me, my pain was surrounding my period. And so obviously I'm in my 20s, and I'm like, I'm not trying to be in menopause, and I'm still in my 20s. I mean, at that point, I hadn't necessarily decided on whether I wanted children or not, but I knew I didn't want to be in menopause in my 20s. So I went the route of just taking the continuous birth control pills. And so with the continuous birth control pills, typically those are the pills that you only get like so many periods per year. So you're just taking the pills, the active pills, continuously to keep your period at bay. And so that's what I did. And so fast forward to 2021, I found myself in the emergency room because I was still working remote at that point. I was in a meeting with a team member, and so while I was in that meeting, like, out of the blue, I just got this extreme pain in the pit in the middle of my stomach, like right under like the breastplate, right in the middle. And I remember saying, ooh, it feels like really bad indigestion. So we wrapped up our meeting, I got off it, and it just got worse. And then I started vomiting. So I took myself to the ER. They ran a battery of tests. They did blood work. They did an MRI. And they basically came back and said, well, you probably could have got a little touch of something, like a little stomach bug or something like that. And so they gave me medication to stop the nausea and the vomiting. And then they also gave me some medication to stop the pain. And they sent me home. And so I went home, and this was about maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So I went home, I got a little rest, I woke back up middle of the day. I still wasn't feeling well, I still just wasn't feeling quite right. And went back to sleep later on that night. I still wasn't really eating, so I tried to make sure that I was just drinking a lot of fluids. Went back to sleep that night, woke back up about 1 or 2 in the morning, and I could not breathe. I mean, I could breathe, but it was difficult. Every time I inhaled, it felt like a stabbing pain underneath my right rib cage every time I inhaled. So I was just taking shallow breaths at that point because I couldn't fully inhale. I thought maybe I pulled a muscle or something from when I was vomiting. I didn't know, so I thought, well, let me take a hot shower and see if that eases the pain and I can breathe better, and that didn't work. So after about 20-30 minutes, I got back in my car, went to the ER, and they did more blood work. So that at that point, the same ER doctor that had that was there the night before who saw me, that same ER doctor came into my room and he said, so unfortunately we're gonna have to admit you. I got your blood results back and your liver enzymes are extremely elevated. And he said, I just pulled the MRI that we did when you were here before, the images, and you have a mass on your liver. And so he started asking questions like, you know, have I been in any car accidents? Am I in any type of abusive situation? Have I fallen? Because they thought maybe it was like a contusion of some sort. And so I answered no to all of those. And he said, okay, well, we don't have any beds open here, but we're going to transport you to another medical center. And we're just going to get you comfortable and get you ready for transport. So I get to the new hospital, and by that point, like, the pain had came back full force. And so they started giving me medication. They started me on morphine. So like every 3 hours they were coming in and shooting me with morphine because of the pain. And I wasn't eating. They were waiting for me to urinate so that they could test for a pregnancy, so they could do another MRI or CT scan or whatever. So I finally did that, and then they finally did the MRI and the CT scan. And so they said, well, you know, we need to do a biopsy. So they did an MRI guided biopsy. The biopsy came back inconclusive. So they basically were just scratching their heads. They didn't know what was wrong with me. And then they basically told me, well, we just need to get your pain under control so that we can release you, because the insurance companies, you know, they don't like to pay after so long with no diagnosis. So that is what I was told. And so I stayed on the morphine for like another day after that happened, and then the pain started subsiding on its own. It started calming down, and so they were able to release me, and then they gave me a list of doctors that I should follow up with. Now, mind you, I did not get a diagnosis, so I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know if this situation, this attack or whatever it was going to come back, if I was going to wind up back in the ER again. So I immediately contacted the first doctor on the list, who was not seeing new patients. But that hospital system, they scheduled me 2 weeks out with another doctor within the liver department. And so I had that scheduled, but then I said, well, I don't want to wait 2 weeks for this to happen again. So let me see if I can get in with the next doctor on the list. So I called the next doctor on the list, and she got me in like a day later. And so I went in there, and she looked at all of the images and everything, and basically was just like, well, yeah, so it's like, it's looking like metastatic cancer. And, you know, since liver cancer is always secondary, or it's most of the time it's secondary, particularly, you know, when it's in a person that's healthy and that they don't have any alcohol, you know, they're not an alcoholic or substance abuse issues or drug users. Liver cancer is usually always secondary. So we just have to find where the cancer came from. We have to pinpoint the primary source of the cancer. And so I was in shock. I was just sitting there by myself, right? Because I don't have any family in the state that I live in. All of my family is in another state. And so that's 5 hours away. And so I sat there in shock. And so then she, sent me on my way to go get more blood work and, told me to schedule another biopsy again. And so I left in shock. I did the blood work. I went home and immediately started planning my funeral, essentially. So I started, thinking about everything that I needed to do as far as like packing up all of my stuff, just to make it easier on my family. I started making lists of all of my bank accounts, all of my investment accounts, making sure that I had the information for my retirement accounts, the beneficiaries were in place, my life insurance policy, making sure the beneficiaries were updated and in place there. And so that's what I was doing. I was going to pack up and just go back home and die at home, so that way it would just be easier on my family, not having to try to plan things and come down to retrieve my body or anything like that. So about a week had passed, and I was just been in a super planning mode, and I just didn't allow myself to feel, because I knew I had to keep it together. I hadn't told anybody because I wanted to get definitive word before I told family members and friends. So I held it in. Nobody knew that, I thought I was getting ready to die for a week. And my best friend called me the end of that week, and we were on a video call, and I kind of broke down at that, I broke down at that point. It all just kind of crashed in on me, the reality of the matter, and that I wouldn't be able to do so many things that I wanted to do. And so at that very moment when I started to break down, I got a phone call from another hospital system where my information was shared. I gave permission for them to share the information. The other hospital system called me, and Dr. Hamilton, he apologized first for, the lengthy time with the scheduling. He said, they should have got you in here right away. But he said, I'm pretty sure I know what's going on, but I want to ask you a few questions first. So he started asking me the same questions that the ER doc asked, and the different question that he asked was, are you on any type of birth control? I said, yes, I'm on oral contraceptive. He said, I figured that. And he was like, how long have you been on it? And I said, I've been on it for roughly 20 years. And I explained to him, the reason for that was to manage my endometriosis. And he said, okay. So he was like, I'm 99.9% sure, based off of all of your medical information that we received and, everything that I've seen, I'm pretty sure you have what's called a hepatocellular adenoma. And the reason why you're in so much pain is because this adenoma, which is a benign liver tumor caused by long-term oral contraceptive use. The reason why you're in so much pain is because this liver tumor ruptured and you were hemorrhaging internally. And the reason why you were having a difficult time breathing is because of you hemorrhaging. The sacs that are in the lower part of your lung started filling up with blood, and so that's where the pain came from every time you inhaled, because your lung partially collapsed, your lower lung partially collapsed. And so he said, this is super concerning, not you in particular, but the situation, because he said we've gotten quite a few of people in here with the same exact case as you over the past year. We've gotten several of these cases, so it's very concerning. He said it's very concerning because the odds, supposedly, of someone having this type of side effect is like 1 in 100,000. But yet, here we are, and he's talking about several of these cases in this particular area, all within a year. So, while when I talk to people and I testify and I tell them my story, especially women, I have no problem telling them these things in person because I want to spread this information. I want people to be aware. I want people to know what's going on with these pharmaceuticals, particularly these pharmaceutical companies, are not being wholeheartedly truthful. So somebody sued some oral contraceptive company some years back over this same issue, and if you look at your packet, the side effects packet that comes with it, you'll see increased risk for liver carcinoma, hepatocellular adenomas, tumors, all the way at the bottom. So you have to drill down and drill into really far down on that big old sheet of medical jargon and information about the drug. You have to go all the way down to find that information. It wasn't on there before, so I think because of that lawsuit now they put that on there. And so I wanted to do this video. I do regular video journals anyway, so I meditate, and after I meditate, I video journal whatever messages come to me. Because I can talk faster than I can write or type, and I have arthritic issues in my limbs, so I do video journals, and so I wanted to take the time to record this video and post it and share my story, and essentially turn my pain into purpose. I'm transmuting my pain into purpose because it was a painful time period for me, not just the misdiagnosis, but what came after. So because my tumor was so large, and so there's different classifications for hepatocellular adenomas. My tumor classified as a inflammatory type, and so it's classified as an inflammatory type because it ruptured. And Dr. Hamilton told me in particular with my biopsy, the reason why it came back inconclusive the first time, and I got a second biopsy. the doctor that told me I had metastatic cancer told me to get another biopsy. The second time it came back as inconclusive. So Dr. Hamilton told me the reason why is because there's nothing there. It's just old blood cells. That's what they pulled back. He said, this is probably ruptured before, and you probably had the same reaction. You probably got sick, probably had pain, and they probably sent you home after they got the pain and the vomiting under control. And he said because of the area where it's rupturing, he said you were really lucky because this is an emergency surgery normally, but because of the area yours ruptured, it did not rupture on any major arteries or veins, to where you would have extensively bled out essentially. And that's why it clotted on its own, and the pain started to subside and started to decrease, as it began to clot. So based off of that, and based off of the diagnosis of it being an inflammatory type of hepatocellular adenoma, the recommendation from a team of liver specialists and surgeons at this particular hospital system was to do a liver resection surgery, which meant that they would cut out the part where the tumor was and then resection my liver. So I decided to go back home to my home state to have the surgery, just because I have no family here in the state that I live in, and I wanted to make sure that if anything were to happen, that my family would be, like, it wouldn't be a burden on them. And so that's why I decided to go back home to my home state, just in case anything happened. It would just be easier for them if my body was up there, if things went left with the surgery. And it was a real possibility. It could have, right? It's not necessarily deemed a high-risk surgery, but it was not a basic surgery, because the liver is very vascular, and one wrong nick and you are basically going to bleed out, and the surgeon have to work very quickly to repair that. And so the surgeon that I had is world-renowned, and he pioneered a technique of doing laparoscopic liver surgery, resection, and transplants. And so they were able to do my surgery laparoscopically, which means that they just cut these small holes all over the place to insert the different tools and actually do the liver resection surgery. So for me, unfortunately, it wasn't just a resection. They had to completely remove the whole left lobe of my liver because the tumor was so large. And aside from it being of the inflammatory type, because it was so large, there was an increased risk of that tumor turning malignant. And so that's why they recommended the liver resection. So when I had the surgery, they just had to go in and remove the whole left lobe of my liver, including my gallbladder. So I was in the hospital for about 3 or 4 days, because after a surgery like that, which was a little over 5 hours, they have to make sure that everything is functioning right. They definitely have to make sure that you can go pee again, because if they stick a catheter in there or whatever. I had a drainage tube out, so they had to take the drainage tube out, and essentially that was, I was in there the first couple days to watch me, right? They needed to watch and make sure everything was good. And then like that third day going into the fourth day, it was waiting for the fluid to slow down with the drain. And so when that finally happened, and they were like, okay, you're ready to go home, everything's good, your panels are good. They took the drainage tube out. I had to build my lung back up again, so walking short distances left me out of breath. I had to sit down, going into work halfway between the parking lot and my office. So yeah, that is my story, and it was traumatic. It was an extremely difficult time. I lost a lot of hair over it. I developed a type of alopecia, which is brought on by trauma and stress. So after my surgery and after that ordeal, my hair fell out, and like I just had 2 massive handfuls of hair. I didn't have any bald spots or bald patches, but it just very much thinned my hair out. And I'm healing from it. After the fact, when they went in, the surgeon discovered I had multiple tumors all over my liver. So essentially, the birth control pills, the combination type birth control pills, which caused this, was literally eating my liver up. It was eating my liver up, and the tumors were fueled by the hormones in the combination birth control pills. And it doesn't give you any warning that this tumor is there and it's growing. I go every year, and I have always gone every year for my physical exams, my well woman exams, where they do full blood panels, and everything always came back normal, save for like, you know, maybe some increased white blood cells here and there, some increased platelets. So there was nothing that was concerning to any of the doctors that I saw. And I say any of the doctors because I move around a lot. I've moved so many times in the last like 15, 20 years. So I've had multiple doctors, and all of these doctors, every single one, I would ask them, you know, I would talk to them about the endometriosis, and I would ask them, are there any other therapies that I can try, because I'm concerned about being on birth control pill long term. And each of them said, oh, there's no need to worry about that. You know, it's completely safe for you to be on these pills, you know, long term. And so, and having multiple doctors tell me that, you know, I just kind of went on about my business, but in the back of my head, I just knew that didn't sound right. It just did not sound right to me. And so I was just like, okay. But since I wasn't given any other options to control my pain, I just went with it. And so having, you know, talked to all of these doctors and having, you know, had them all tell me, like, you know, there's nothing that you need to be concerned about. I just rolled with it, right? And so it didn't give me any indication all these years while I had this tumor growing on my liver that there was an issue. And so after I went through, you know, this ordeal, and I, you know, started on the road to recovery essentially. And after, you know, they went in, they removed the large tumor, and then they saw all the multiple small tumors. The doctor pretty much told me, you know, typically when women have these types of tumors, once they get off of the birth control pills, they will see a reduction, like they will go away and they will disappear on their own. And so they removed the large one that was causing the issues, and, you know, that could have possibly ruptured again. But then all of the small ones, he had to leave because he could not remove all of that. Then I probably would have went into liver failure. And so from 2021, I had my liver resection surgery in October of 2021. And then from there, all the way up until June of this year, 2023, I was getting blood work done twice a year, as well as an ultrasound twice a year, to ensure that the leftover tumors were not growing and that, you know, everything was copacetic going on in here. So, June of this year, my surgeon finally released me, and everything was good. I have not had any more issues since, but I wanted to just make this video to get the word out, so that women can make informed decisions when they are having conversations with their doctors about various different medical issues, birth control, and things of that nature. Pay attention to these pharmaceuticals that you are taking. Like, I don't care if you know, need to schedule out a time in your schedule to read through all of the warnings and the side effects. Read that whole accordion paper, because they vary, like, some of this stuff far down in the language. We absolutely have to be our own best advocates, particularly out here in these medical streets, being a black woman, being a woman of color, brown and black women, a minority, because a lot of times they don't listen to us. And it doesn't take me to tell you guys that. Like, they have actual studies that you know, where they've done surveys of medical professionals, and they actually say we don't believe black people, black women, when they say they're in pain, or we believe that, you know, they experience pain on a different level, or it's not as pronounced as a white person. Like, they truly believe some of this crazy ass shit. And so we have to be our own advocates. If something doesn't feel right, it doesn't seem right, it doesn't sound right, sis, it probably ain't right. Go with your instinct and your gut. Go with what your gut tells you. Whatever your intuition is telling you, like, go with it. Like, I knew that didn't sound right from all these doctors. I asked my doctor, my current doctor, I asked like multiple doctors, and they all told me it was perfectly safe. And she was like, well, because it's supposed to be something that's a rare occurrence, and it's, you know, in our medical books, it's like, you know, almost kind of like fine print. So that's why they all said that, because they really do think that it's, you know, it's perfectly safe. But it's not a rare occurrence. And I just want to get the word out based off of the doctor that I talked to, when he said this is really concerning because we've had multiple cases like this in the last year. That tells me that instead of 1 out of 100,000, it's really more like 1 out of 1,000, or, you know, something like that. Like, the number is a whole lot, you know, closer than 100,000. I can tell you that. So we have to be our own best advocates. We have to speak up. And if, you know, something doesn't sound right or feel right, like, it is okay for you to go get a second opinion. It is okay for you to seek out a specialist in their field to assist you. So I hope that this video helps another woman avoid going through the pain and suffering that I went through, the trauma that I went through. And I'm just gonna leave you with, you know, make sure that you are paying attention to your body, because your body will absolutely tell you when some shit ain't right. So get in tune with your body, listen to it, be your own best advocate, and you all be blessed and be a blessing to somebody else. And if you have any questions for me regarding my situation and my ordeal, I will put my contact information, my email address with this video, so that you can reach out. And please don't hesitate, reach out. I am an open book. I just want to save another woman from going through this situation, and make sure that you all are informed and armed with the knowledge that you need to make the best decision for yourself, for your body, for your family. So I'll talk to you guys later. Be blessed and be a blessing.